learning is so platonic, is so give and take. This will be a more frontal class, although we will have a little bit of time for questions and input. And the reason it's frontal is there's so much ground that we have to cover, and I want to share with you some thoughts on one of the most powerful prayers in the prayer book, in the Machzor, the Unetaneh Tokef. And in your Koren Machzorim, you could find it on page 564 or 565. Years back when the shul first started, we had a Baal Musaf who wanted to introduce many nigunim, and this Baal Musaf did just that, and then tried to introduce a different nigun to the Rosh Hashanah Yikatevim. And when this person was through, Stanley, in the sweetest way, went up, Alav Hashalom, and said to him, "You can change all the nigunim in the world, but Rosh Hashanah, it's got to be the same nigun." So most people identify, hi Ruth, good to see you. Most people identify Unetaneh Tokef by this song, and I encourage you to join me. B'rosh Hashanah yikatevun u'b'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. B'rosh Hashanah yikatevun u'b'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. How many shall pass away, and how many will be born? Who will live, and who will die? Every time I say those words, I think about people who were here last year and are not here this year. And getting older, the prayer resonates for me even more powerfully. This prayer is an awesome prayer, and on some level, it's a frightening prayer. There have been people through the years who have told me I can't experience a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur without Unetaneh Tokef, and there have been some who have come and told me that they can't be in shul for Unetaneh Tokef. It's too much. In fact, while Ashkenazim say this prayer, Unetaneh Tokef, the Sfardim in Bet Aron, Sfardim around the world, do not say this prayer. This prayer is not recited. And there have been individuals who have asked me over the years, can I change the nusach from Ashkenaz to Sfard so I don't have to daven in an Ashkenazi tefillah because of this prayer? But in the same breath, I would say, I've not taken a survey, but anecdotally for most people, this is a centerpiece of the service. And it begins with the words, Unetaneh Tokef, let us voice the power of this day's sanctity. And if you turn the page, there is this magnificent second line in the Hebrew, Umalachim yechafezun. So awesome is the day that the angels scurry about. Here they rush forward. V'chil ura'ada yochezun. And they're trembling and shaking. V'yomru, and they say, Hinei, behold, Yom Hadin. Behold the day of judgment. And turning back to page 565 in the Hebrew, God is here described as, he's described not in the as Mochiach. God is the accuser, God is the Va'ed, he is the witness, and God is the Dayan, and God is the judge. the language here is ki atahu dayan, you're the judge. Umochiach, ocheach tochiach, you're the accuser. V'yodea, and you know everything. You see everything. God sees everything. Va'ed, va'ed, va is the conjunctive, and you are the witness. So when you read these words, one starts shaking. My goodness, this is the day of judgment. But I would like to look, and in fact, it then continues after you set the scene. In the next paragraph, we say, on Rosh Hashanah, it is written on Yom Kippur, it is inscribed, and we have this imagery of God who's looking at our particular scales of good deeds and bad deeds. And depending upon what we've done, there is the judgment. And then the next paragraph says, and who will die by sword, who will die by fire? You can shake in your boots, whether you're wearing boots or not. You can shake. It's a frightening, frightening prayer from that perspective. But I'd like to argue counterintuitively that over the years, I've looked at this prayer as a prayer of love, a prayer in which God's judgment is tempered with kindness, is tempered with mercy. There are two kinds of judges. There's a judge who judges and judges sternly, and then there is a judge who says, I love you and I'm going to give you every benefit of the doubt. And that, I believe, is this first paragraph, which gives us the general scenario of what is going to follow. And if you look into Hebrew, Unetaneh Tokef kedushat hayom, let us voice the power of this day's sanctity. Kihu No'raim v'ayom. It is an awesome day. V'ayom. It is an overpowering day. I'm not sure about the translation. Terrible. It's overpowering. Uvo tinasei malchutecha. And on this day your rulership is raised. It's clear you are the ruler. But I love the next phrase. And what's the foundation of that rulership? V'yikon b'chesed kisecha. Your throne, kisecha from kisei, yikon means it's founded upon. The foundation of your throne is chesed. The foundation of your throne is kindness. It is love. And if we turn the page to this magnificent phraseology, Uvishofar gadol yitaka, God blasts the great shofar. And so the imagery is this big shofar and this loud noise, again, sternness, harshness. But the great shofar is sounded, v'kol dimama daka yishama. And what is heard? Not a loud sound, but a still, small voice is heard. And then this beautiful, beautiful imagery. If we turn the page, kiva karan roa edro. I get the chills when I read this. As a shepherd's searching gaze near his flock. The way I really understand the word kiva karat, I understand it from the word bikur, which means visit, and sometimes more broadly to watch. As a shepherd tends his or her flock, so too God mavir sono tachat shifto. So too, you pass every sheep beneath your rod. Mavir kiva karat roet sono mavir sono tachat shifto, and every one of the shepherd's sheep goes beneath his rod. Kain tavi v'tispo v'timne v'tifko nefesh kol chai. You do the same, God. You are the shepherd with an uppercase S. You too pass yours. Count and number and regard the soul of every living thing. Very powerful. I remember when we were burying my mother died on Yom Kippur, and we were in the back of a tender, Israel style. My mother's buried in Netanya, where my parents lived. And in those days, Shikun Vatikim was like the Wild West. There was hardly anything there. Now it's really built up with a college, with apartments. Then there was nothing. And as the tender with my mother's body, and we were on both sides, all of her children and my father, myself and my siblings, and suddenly this car, it wasn't a hearse at all, comes to a full stop. And what crosses the road, the dirt road? Could you believe what crosses the dirt road is a herd of sheep? And my sister Tova looked up and said, that's Mommy. Mommy was a shepherd. Each one of us was the world, like a shepherd taking care of a sheep. If the shepherd returns with one less sheep, the shepherd returns at night really crying, understanding that, oh my goodness, look what has happened. That's the way God judges us. And probably the most powerful word of that first paragraph which we're studying is if you turn back to 567, V'chol ba'ei olam yavrun lefonecha kivnei moron. And all who have come into this world pass before you like maron. Maron. And that word maron is the subject of a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah and a discussion in the Gemara. So let's take it inside. If you take a look at 1a, let's take a look at this inside. Bernie, would you want to take just the beginning? Rosh Hashanah? In the Hebrew. Do you mind? Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah kol ba'ei olam ovrim lefanav kivnei maron.
The Mishnah teaches that on Rosh Hashanah, all creatures pass before him like B'nai Maron. And now the Gemara asks,
My kivnei maron.
what does B'nai Maron mean? Now we could spend a couple of hours on what we're about ready to study, to read. But we're going to go through this quickly with just some observations because we have much ground to cover. What is Kivnei Maron? Hachar Tigmenu.
Kivnei Maron.
Hachar Tigmu Kivnei Maron. My Kivnei Maron. Hachar Tigmu Kivnei Amarna. Let's take a look at the English. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the phrase B'nai Maron? The Gemara answers, here in Babylonia they interpret it to mean like a flock of sheep. Kivnei Imarna. That's the Aramaic for sheep. That's what it is. Every sheep is an individual. Every sheep is the world. That's one opinion. What does Reish Lakish say? Reish Lakish says, Kimalot Beit Maron. On the English, Reish Lakish disagreed and said, like the ascent of Beit Maron, which was very steep. When you go up to Maron, Maron is on top of Tzfat, and the road is very, very narrow. You've got to go up one by one. It's the same idea. It's the singular person, but again, if we just allow our imaginations to float, you're walking up that mountain. So it's not just sheep, this is adding something. It's the hope that each of us as individuals will be in a constant movement of ascending, of reaching up. Like the ascent of Bet Maron, which was very steep. One standing at the summit could discern all those climbing the mountains with a single look. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar, the last line.
Shmuel.
Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel,
Kechayalot shel Beit David.
like the soldiers of the house of the king of David. Which reminds me of a beautiful story that my father would tell about in the name of Agnon. Agnon tells the story that when a leader looks at his returning victorious forces, the leader is elated. But when the leader, the ruler of rulers, God himself looks at the returning army, God is happy that there's been victory, but God is in tears. Because not all of those who went out return. God counts us Kivnei Maron, which speaks to a more assertiveness of the human being. But here you have it. Let's look at the Unetaneh Tokef. V'chol ba'ei olam yavrun lefonecha Kivnei Maron. We come and pass before you like sheep. Yes, it is a day of judgment, but it's a day where that judgment, what we're articulating, interfaces with love. And this is a larger theme of the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur days, and this is a larger concept in all of Judaism. And let's take 1b, which is really Rashi in the beginning of the Torah. The Torah says, Breshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. And then, in chapter 2, sentence 4, it says, B'yom baro Hashem Elokim, on the day that the Lord God created. So Rashi, quoting the Midrash, notes that in the beginning it says God's appellative title is only Elohim, Breshit bara Elohim. That's in chapter 1, which is the general story of creation. And in chapter 2, when it gives us the creation story and it details more the creation of the human being, God is not only called Elohim, but God is Hashem Elohim. So let's take it inside. Ellen, do you want to take it? Elohim denotes.
Elohim denotes God under the aspect of justice.
Elohim is the Midat Hadin. Elohim is always the God of judgment. Elohim is a term in the Bible that's not necessarily God. Elohim could also be human judges. It could be human judges, or it could be a God, and it's in the plural because the power of God is so multiple. Elohim denotes God under the aspect of justice. That's why chapter 1, which deals with the power of creation, it says that God created the world with his aspect of justice, while Adonai,
The Lord, is his designation as the God of mercy.
right, in Hebrew, Adonai is Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's pronounced, if you read it the way it's written, it's pronounced Yehovah, but we never read it that way. It's beyond pronunciation.
The Nikudot are from Adonai.
But that's right. The Nikudot are normally,
Adonai.
normatively from Adonai, correct. That is the God of mercy. Yehovah, again, Adonai is a compound, a composite of Hayahu Vev Yiyeh, was, is, and will be. And the fact that there was and is and will be is against everything logical. That is expressive of God's mercy. So let's continue now, Ellen. Only
Only the former is used here.
Rashi, quoting the Midrash, is making this comment on the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning, God created, so the name of God is Elohim. Only the former, only the God of justice is mentioned in chapter 1. In the beginning, God created, because
At first, God created the world strictly on the principle
first
of
God
justice.
created the world just on justice. Breshit bara Elokim. Go on.
Seeing, however, that the world could not endure on that basis alone, he added the principle of mercy.
Seeing that it couldn't endure in chapter 2, which I don't have right in front of me, there, the language in the sentence, when it talks about the creation of the world, it's not just Breshit bara Elokim, but God is described as Hashem Elokim. Not just the God of justice, but Hashem. And as a matter of fact, Hashem precedes the Elokim. It's the Lord God. God is justice. The Lord is mercy. So that, I'm sorry, he added the principle
He
of
added
mercy.
the principle of mercy,
Right.
so that when one sinned, justice would be tempered
That's
with
an
mercy.
important expression which is central to the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur service, to the whole philosophy of Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Hadin. What does Yom Hadin mean? The day of judgment. But it's also called Yom HaKeseh, Chaf Samachay. Now, simply, Keseh is from the word,
Gathering.
it could be gathering, excellent, people gather. It could be Kisei, the throne of God. Normatively, it's understood as being Kisui, hidden, because the moon is hidden. It's one of the only holidays where the moon, generally holidays begin in the middle of the month, so you see the moon in the fullness. Now the moon has been hidden. But one could also understand Yom HaKeseh to mean that God hides the strict judgment. It's soft. Yom HaKeseh, God is going to conceal what we really deserve and is going to look at every human being, God willing, with mercy, so that when one sinned, justice would be tempered with mercy. Din deflects to rachamim. Therefore, the next chapter states, in the day that the Lord God made heaven, and earth. I'll stop here just for a minute because I want to move on now to the second segment, which is B'Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun Uviyom Tzom Kippur Yechotemun. In sum, one looks at this and one can't help but see that this is Unetaneh Tokef, Unetaneh from Latet. One looks at this day and it's a day when one must ascribe to it, or the translation here is, let us voice the power. One must ascribe to it Tokef. What does Tokef mean? Tokef means Unetaneh Tokef. Tokef means power, strength. Right? It does have, it's full of that concept that God sits as judge. But what we're adding here is to look at this as one of the classic cases of judgment, but judgment with mercy. To the point that mercy, judgment becomes mercy. It's like a parent who has to give rules to a child. How do you give those rules? Do you do it with only sternness, or do you do it with mercy? Do you do it with a great deal of love? Just for a minute or two, any reflections, thoughts, comments on this? Good. Let me go further.
Is there a connection because of this Mishnah? Because we say that this is the beginning of the creation of the world.
Yes.
And the interpretation that it's that it's both justice and mercy of which the world was created.
Right. And look, that's a very good point that I did not mention. Thank you. That Rosh Hashanah, what are we celebrating?
The birthday of the world.
Hayom Harat Olam. We're celebrating the creation of the
We're
world.
celebrating with both justice and mercy.
That's right. That's what we are celebrating. That's what we're celebrating. And it's a good question to meditate upon before Rosh Hashanah. How do we experience God? Do we experience God as judgment? Or do we experience God as mercy? Or is it a judgment which is tempered with mercy? And then we get to B'Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun. And let's take a look at... Yes?
We don't mention the word love. We mention mercy and justice. But how about ahava?
Right.
That seems to be missing in.
Yeah, I would, and I'm sorry, I'm surprised I missed that word. They used to call me Rabbi Love because that's all I spoke about. But let's look at 2a. This is the way normatively, after this introduction, after setting the scene, this is normatively the way V'Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun Uviyom Tzom Kippur Yechotemun is understood. Let's take it 2a. Arnie, could you take it in the English? The sins
of every person is weighted together with his merits on Rosh Hashanah. If one is found righteous, his verdict is sealed for life. If one is found wicked, his verdict is sealed for death.
Now, this is actually the Rambam in Hilchot Shuvah, and the Rambam is lifting this from the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Tet Zayin. So that's the imagery. The imagery is that the sins of every person is weighted together with his merits, and if you're found righteous, then you're inscribed for a good year. If you're found wicked, then it's the reverse. Continue, please. Turn the page. On the back, if one belongs
to the immediate class,
to the intermediate class. In other words, I'm not fully wicked, I'm not fully righteous. If I'm an in-betweener, then
sentence is suspended till the day of atonement. If
Go
he
on.
repents, he is sealed to life. If not, he is sealed to death.
right, and the classic imagery of Rosh Hashanah are these scales. So this doesn't exactly say that. This says that on Rosh Hashanah it's penciled in, and on Yom Kippur the pencil we go over what's in pencil with pen. But it's this basic concept, which Rambam puts forth, but which many authorities have problems with. They have empirical problems with. Because while this is normatively the way this is understood, and then we get into it, and who will be born, and who will die, and who will live, and so on and so forth, who by fire, and who by water, v'chulu. As the Ravid, who is a critique of the Rambam, points out, that's not necessarily so. We see that there are many wicked people. Think about the most wicked of persons just 75 years ago. He lived through many years of Rosh Hashanah. This is saying that everybody is being judged. I mean, there was no good to him at all. Now, is that possible? Is this true? Is it true that the good always get the year and the evil don't? Is it true?
No.
Yes.
How do you reconcile the Holocaust with that?
Right. How do you
Million of
reconcile
all those
it?
people were not wicked people.
Mhm.
So how do you, 6 million people?
So I want to open the class up to, this shiur up to a very different approach, which is the approach of the Ravid I mentioned. It's the approach of the Tosafot, who is an early commentary on the Gemara. It's the approach of the Ramban Nachmanides. It's the approach of the Gra of the Vilna Gaon. They understand the Gemara. I'm not saying the liturgists understood it that way, but there's no doubt that these lines were taken from the Gemara. And the way the Tosafot and all of them understand those lines about judgment on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are you ready? It has nothing to do with this world. It has everything to do with the hereafter. Not with this world, but with the next world. If you take a look at 3a, this is the Tosfos. V'chol ze dekari hacha gabi rishoyim mita, v'gabi tzadikim chayim, the death sentence for the wicked and life for the righteous, kloma l'chayei ha'olam haba. And I believe this is based on the Talmud in Kiddushin 39b, and this is not a minority view. There have been academic studies, there have been papers written on this position of Rabbi Yaakov, where Rabbi Yaakov says, Schar mitzvah b'hai al maleka, there is no reward for doing good deeds in this world. The reward for doing good deeds is what?
Doing the good deed.
Is doing the good deeds. It's the deed itself. The reward separate from the good deeds, when does that come?
Later.
That's later, whatever the world to come means. It's not for this world, it's l'chayei ha'olam haba. Now, is there anybody who can help me understand why Rabbi Yaakov's position, it's a salient position. It's a position actually that is quite logical. In what sense?
Based on what we see around us.
Based on what we see around us. Based on what we see empirically. Empirically, certainly. I would say, I think it also takes the mitzvah to another level. You know, in Pirkei Avot it says, don't perform a mitzvah, amanat lekabel schar, don't do something to get a reward, but why should you do it? Do it not to get a reward, you do it for the right reason. So empirically we're seeing that it's not always the case that good deeds are rewarded. And beyond that, I think it lifts the good deed to a higher level, that I'm not doing it for any ulterior motive, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. But I would add the following, open your minds just for a moment. I didn't say open your hearts, because this is a mind idea. If I knew that for every good deed that I perform, I'm going to receive a reward. For every $5, for every $18 that I'm going to give to tzedakah, I'm going to get back $36. Now, of course I'm going to give $18. And if I knew that the moment I'm going to speak slander, my tongue is going to cleave to my palate, I'm not going to be able to speak. Who speaks slander? Now maybe there'll still be some people who speak slander, they just can't hold it back. And maybe some people still won't give the tzedakah. I don't know. But for most people, if there would be absolute reward and punishment, what would happen? We would be bereft of,
Freedom of choice.
we'd be bereft of freedom of choice. Now, this position of Rabbi Yaakov, again, is not an underground position. This is really, not that there aren't other opinions. There are other opinions, but this is an important position. And so if we read it that way, when it says, B'Rosh Hashanah yikatevun uv'yom tzom kippur yechatemun, on Rosh Hashanah it is written and on Yom Kippur it is sealed, what does it refer to? It doesn't refer to this world, it refers to the future world.
That would help.
Now, I
us
know that
cope.
this is actually a curveball or a slider for many, many people because we're so accustomed to thinking, my God, it's written and it's sealed as it relates to life today. And here we're arguing that it may not have anything to do with life today.
Rabbi Weiss, are you opening up the concept of heaven?
Yes, I am. I'm opening up the concept of heaven, I'm opening up the concept of God, I'm opening up the concept of life after death, which is for another discussion. I'm opening up the concept, actually, of that which is critical for this worldly life in the sense, I'm going back to what I just said, that if I'm going to argue that this doesn't relate to something beyond life, but it relates to our own lives, then we would lose our humanity. We would lose our humanness because it would take our freedom of choice away. So this phrase, hold on a second, this phrase, B'Rosh Hashanah yikatevnu v'yom tzom kippur yechatemun, I'm not at all claiming that what I'm presenting here is the only approach, that Tosafot approach is the only. I'm not saying that. Of course, you can come into Rosh Hashanah, and if you want the old image, it's hard to change it's hard to change our behavior. I'm talking to myself and letting you listen. It's hard to change ideas that we've grown up with. We've all grown up with that this is this worldly idea. And here I'm presenting something very different. Rosh Hashanah yikatevun u'v'yom tzom kippur yechatemun actually is talking about the future world, but what becomes problematic is what follows. Jessica asked the question, what's problematic? If that's what we're talking about, how do we understand what follows? Mi yichyeh u'mi yamut, that seems to be very this worldly. Mi v'kitzo, mi v'lo b'kitzo. So if it's the future world, how do we understand this phrase?
The two don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can also have, during his time in the future, in whatever that means, reward from, or in heaven, and, in their time, if they have a short time in heaven or a long time in heaven.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, please.
if you look at it like that, I'm saying that at the same, while you're saying you can tell me, this is my year to pass, that my Olam Haba and Schar and Olam Haba should be intact, or that's what, meaning it's per year. It's not for what I'm,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're looking at per year, so.
Right.
It is physical things, because we're in a physical world, so if this is my year of Amayim, that hopefully my mitzvot would redeem me for Olam Haba in that, this specific
Okay.
year.
I want to take a look at this paragraph, and I want to read it through, because over the years when I was a little boy, as a teenager, and a younger man, This paragraph just didn't resonate with me. I just felt the words were old, they were archaic, especially when we got to these words. You know that capital punishment was hardly carried out, but we're learning the daf now about capital punishment, and there's capital punishment by stoning, there's capital punishment with skila, there's chanika, strangulation, hanging. And what are we reading here? We're reading Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun, Uviyom Tzom Kippur Yechotemun. Let's take a look at it on the English side. How many will pass away? How many will be born? Who will live and who will die? And then what follows is it's not life and death stuff. What follows is all kinds of different possibilities of the way we'll die. Oh, that's really a hard prayer. You see the way it begins? It begins with how many will pass away and how many will be born? And who will live and who will die? It'd be interesting to understand the difference between those two phrases. Who in his due time and who before? Now what are we talking about? We're not talking about life and death. We're talking about what? We're talking about different ways of dying. If there's any contrast, it's only, who by water and who by fire? Who by sword and who by beast? So the prayer is a hard prayer. Now beyond it being a hard prayer, does it really relate to us? Who by strangling, who by stoning, and it seems to be evoking these different forms of putting people to death, which were hardly carried out. It just seems so out of touch with contemporary times. But I'd like to take a look at this paragraph, and I want to read it with you, and let's read it with an openness of heart. So let's take it. Let's take it from the last word of the third line of that second paragraph on page 568. Who in his due time and who before? I'm 73. Probably the average age of life is a few years older. King David says, Yemei shnotenu shivim shana. People live 70 years. If you're fortunate, 80 years. They say today's 70 is yesterday's 50. Who in his due time? I have many classmates who are not alive. As you know, we have 3 children. They're married, so we now have 6 children, but we had another child, Yitzhak Raphael. He died in the beginning of his 4th month from a disease that had no name. It was so rare at that time. It was called a renal cerebrohepato disease. Now it has a name, Zellweger. In the beginning of his 4th month. He died not at his time. It started to resonate for me. Now, what did he do to deserve? What did he do to deserve to die in the beginning of his 4th month? Nothing. He was as innocent as innocent can be.
Rabbi Weiss, do you ever ask yourself what you did?
Yeah. And so what are you implying?
That
Children are
something
punished
that-
for the disease, for the...
I mean, it's a natural question.
It's a fair question.
God, what did I do to deserve it?
But, yeah, but okay, but the Torah says, Lo yumtu, thank God my children are not judged by what I've done and not done. The Torah says, Lo yumtu avot al banim, ubanim al avot. We are judged on our own, and those other sentences you have
We
to...
say, "Pokei rabon avot."
Yeah, but those sentences you have to figure out. The mainstream opinion is we are judged for what we do and for what we do not do. Who by water? I mean, this Rosh Hashanah, we're now in the wake of Houston, of Harvey, of Irma. I mean, I was down in Houston. I walked into Rabbi Barry Gelman's shul. I sat down on the floor and I cried. And I know that it's not the destruction of the temple, but I kept thinking of the sentence from Lamentations from Eicha, Eini Yordo Mayim. I was really in tears. His sanctuary was in 6 feet of water. That's the second time in just a few years, and they're going to have to build on a higher plane. I was in the conservative synagogue, 1,800 family synagogue. The complete sanctuary is destroyed. They're not going to be able to use it for Rosh Hashanah, that's for sure. Barry and Gabi, his wife, they've moved out of their home now for the second time. They were in one home, told to move to another home that had never flooded. Well, his home flooded. Now they're moving into a 1,000 square foot apartment with 5 children, 2 little bedrooms. Some are away in school, but it's not so simple. Who by water? Who by fire? I'm thinking back to the San Diego fires. Who by sword? Never made any sense to me. Yeah, but I'm thinking Daniel Pearl. Did he deserve it? Did Barry or Gabi deserve it? Now, look, only God knows. But did Daniel Pearl deserve an end that he got?
And when it says sword, they mean beheading.
Okay, and who by beast? It could mean a beast, but it could mean human beings who become beasts. Who of hunger, this world? A large percentage of the world goes to sleep at night hungry and thirsty. Who by thirst? Who by earthquake? Most recently Mexico. It's constantly happening. Did everybody in that earthquake deserve those who died to die? Did they deserve it? And who by plague? Who by strangling? I'm thinking about 9/11. I was a clergy first responder. I met firefighters who told me that they felt like they were choking, chanika. That they were caught in the building, and just by fortune, the building had come down, they were able to extricate themselves, some of them. And who by stoning? For me, this is not the stoning of someone in capital punishment. For me, after 9/11, it's those stones from those Twin Towers that came down. And in all of this, it's not the case that people who die in this way, let me be bold enough to say that they were deserving of this kind of death. I mean, there were 3,000 people in the Twin Towers. And let's say you can figure out that some were deserving. Although a cornerstone of my whole philosophy of life and my rabbinate is non-judgmentalism. Just non-judgmentalism. I was at a convention where a rabbi, my senior years ago, said, Avi is so non-judgmental, for him there's no such thing as a tzaddik or a rasha. There's no such thing as a righteous or a wicked person. And I responded and I said, I'm sure there is, but I'll let God decide. I'm not going to decide. Now, maybe you can argue that doesn't help my case because God is doing this. But I'd like to think, and here I'm walking, as a small person in the shoes of Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu, when God says, I'm going to destroy all the Jews after the spy incident, or God says, go and do war against Sichon, Moshe turns to God and says, all of Sichon? We're going to kill everybody in Sichon? You mean there are no innocent people in Sichon? So what I'd like to put out there is that this paragraph is a paragraph that says that in life we are all going to be people, by definition, who will suffer. All of us have a certain fate over which we have no control. This is a paragraph that talks about human fate. If you take a look at number 4a, Amar Rava, said Rava, Chayai banai umzonai. Chayai banai umzonai. Length of days. Children. Will I have children? What kind of children will they be? Ubezonai. and sustenance, will I make a living or not? Lo bizchuta talya milta, has nothing to do with merit, ela b'mazala talya milta. It's all a function of mazel. Now, I'm not arguing as Rabbi Kushner argued, and when bad things happen to good people, that it's random. I don't believe anything is random. I believe that whatever happens, this is a belief, that it has God's imprimatur. But I think that there are things that are beyond us that we just don't understand. When I get up there, I'm going to have a lot of questions if I'm going to be given the opportunity to ask God. There are a lot of whys that I have. But what this suggests is just what it says. Length of life, children, and sustenance depend not on merit, but rather on mazel. So when I read this paragraph, and this paragraph says, who will die by fire and who will die by stoning? Why did Daniel Pearl, why was he murdered the way he was murdered? Why did people lose their lives in the Mexican earthquake or in the Harvey hurricane? Why? Do you know what the answer is? Why? What's the answer?
Because.
Because. That's the answer.
What's the etymology?
That's the answer. Why? Because human beings don't understand. Now, again, here there's debate where there would be those who would say that it just happened by chance. Here I step in and I guess this is what separates emunah and not emunah. I have just the belief, and if you don't believe this, I love you just the same. I have the belief that my infant son, for reasons that God only understands, I don't know why that was the fate. But I do know one thing. It had nothing to do with what he did. And I don't believe it had anything to do with what anybody did. I don't know why it happened. I don't know why it happened. If you'll take a look at Rabbi Soloveitchik writing after the Holocaust, you raised the Shoah, it's number 6. Take a look at the first 2 lines. He writes, in his Kol Dodi Dofek, after the Shoah, there were many, many people, many rabbis who were giving reasons why there was a Shoah. I know why 6 million died. He wrote this in 1956. This is the great Soloveitchik. You know what he said? Why was there a Shoah? What did he say? I don't know. I don't know why that was the fate of individuals, and not only is there a fate of individuals, there is a fate, a goral of a collective community as well. In short, the eye of fate, each of us has a certain eye within us. You're talking Rabbi Soloveitchik language. We have an eye of fate, asks a speculative metaphysical question with regard to evil. What is that question? What is the question we ask? It's a 3-letter word. Why? Absolutely. Why? Why did this happen? And this question, the great Rabbi Soloveitchik, who knew a lot about philosophy, says, is not susceptible to solution and has no answer. It's Ariella, who's now a wonderful young woman. When she was a little girl, she came home and she said, I learned this funny song in school, and the song went, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, why, oh, why, oh, why, because, that's why, that's why, that's why. That's what this paragraph is saying. This paragraph is saying, who by this and who by that? Who knows? Who knows? Yes, Ted.
First, a question. This prayer, Unetaneh Tokef, does it apply to only Jews, or is it a question or is it a prayer that applies to good and evil with regard to all people?
My response would be to all people. Because
So-
the language here is Kol Ba'ei Olam, all humankind pass before you.
Okay, so
It's a universal prayer.
So during the Shoah, 6.5 million Jews were killed, 1.5 million of them children. But there were like 10 million people killed in concentration camps, and there were like 50 million people killed during World War II. So to me, that broadens the question
I think it does. I think it does, Ted.
a bit.
I mean, I would remind you of Elie Wiesel of Blessed Memories' comment, not all, what his language was, not all people were victims, but all victims were Jews, something like that. There was a play on the word, it's not coming back to me. Look, this goes back to an understanding of the Shoah. In the Shoah, of course, there were many people beyond the Jewish peoplehood who were killed. But the intent to murder Jews was very, very a unilateral attempt to murder Jews. Yes, Ted.
So, just to finish the point,
Yeah.
the focus, of course, was clear. But maybe here the word that applies to other people who were not intentionally killed or died for no reason that's discernible is collateral damage. You know, a hurricane, when it comes through, it doesn't just pick out evil people. There's collateral damage.
I just remember the Wiesel line. Not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were victims. That was the line. Yeah.
Rabbi Weiss, could you go back to the beginning, the concept of hiddenness?
Right.
Because me, I'm thinking with all this randomness and, you know,
I don't.
why?
Right.
Is it because God is totally hidden?
No. I want to come back to this because the word random, and that's a word that Kushner constantly used. That's a word that he uses. I have great problems with it. I don't think things happen in the world for random. I can't empirically prove it. It's a belief system. But before I take questions, I want to bring this full circle. Let's take a look at it further because there's another step here. The next step is that after we read this paragraph of mi yichyeh, mi yamut, mi bekitzo, mi lo bekitzo, we then call out what words in the Hebrew. Judy, do you want to take it? The bottom of page 569, utshuva.
Utshuva, utshuva, tzedakah, ma'avirin, and roah hagzera.
Now the Birnbaum Machzor translates this, but repentance, prayer, and charity cancels the evil decree. Cancels the evil decree. Rabbi Sachs translates it, avert the evil of the decree.
Or postpone.
Wait, avert the evil of the decree. I'm not sure I agree even with this translation. What is this line all about? Utshuva, utfila, utzdaka, mavirin, et roa hagzera. So if you look here for a second, I want to just share with you a concept which again is one of the most important concepts from the Rav, from my Rebbe, from Rabbi Soloveitchik. He says as follows. He says, we're all born with a certain fate over which we have no control. And that's that Talmudic statement. Chayai, how long we will live? Will we have children? What kind of children? Will we make a living? Lo b'zchut atayinota ela b'mazala. Now, although we have no control over our fate, he's going to argue we can impact our fate. It's actually based on the Gemara in Yevamot. So let's take a look at 5a for a moment. Let's take a look at 5a. Let's read it inside. Bernie Tanya.
Tanya, מספר ימיך עמלי, אלו שני דורות.
So the sentence is, at Mispar Yomecha, the length of your days, I will fill out. Elu Shnei Dorot. This refers to the lengths of generations, or the lengths of one's years. And the sages say, if one is worthy, years are added to one's life. If unworthy, the years of his life or her life are reduced. What is this saying? This is saying that when we're born, if we could speak to God, God will say, this is the amount of years that you will live. But this Talmudic piece says, let's say I'm supposed to live 110 years. Let's give it a long time. What's the joke my uncle always tells Srokum with the Joker? He says that the rabbi goes to a nursing home and he says, how old are you? The person says, I'm 90. The rabbi says, have a good 30 years. How old are you? I'm 100. The next person, he says, you have a good 20 years. Goes to the third person, how old are you? He says, I'm 120. The rabbi says, have a good day. So that's Shroka joke. In the midst of this seriousness, we can be a bit light. Why not? So let's say I'm supposed to live 100 years. Now, what this text says, I'm supposed to live 100 years, and I can't undo that decree. That's the fate. But I can impact the decree. If I live properly, I can, maybe I can add to the years. If I don't live properly, I'll detract from those years. Let me say this in more contemporary language. If I want to know whether I am going to be physically healthy in life, if I want to know whether I'm going to suffer from cardiac disease, if I want to know whether I'm going to suffer from emotional depression, a good start would be to check out your pedigree. Right? My father had cardiac disease, his father had cardiac disease, and probably his father had cardiac disease. It's in the DNA. That's a certain fate. We're genetically born in a certain way. We have no control over that. But, and here I'm really talking to myself and letting you listen, if I eat the right foods, I'm on a new diet now, I hope I'll do a little better. If I eat the right foods and I exercise, maybe I can impact. I mean, I had a heart attack when I was 42 years old. I'm still around. Who knows? Maybe it was something that I did or others did that, whatever the decree was, lengthened the years. Will I suffer from emotional depression? Hold on a second. Will I suffer from emotional depression? A good start would be to check out, is there emotional depression in your family? That's a good start. But whatever it is, will my child have a learning disability? A good start is to check out background and so on. But given that background, or given an autism, or given a certain deficiency, with patience and with love and a little bit of money, you know this better than anyone, you can make a great difference. That's the story of your lives, Bev and Ted.
5 years married.
5 years married. And I had the great zchut to do Judy, who was dysautonomia's wedding. Years ago, my cousin suffered from dysautonomia. He lived till 36. He was the second longest living dysautonomia victim in those days. I did Judy's wedding, and bride and groom was sitting, and I was sitting, and it was... Can you take away the dysautonomia? You can't take it away. There's certain stuff you can't take away. There's a certain fate you can't take away. But what can you do? You can impact the fate. You can impact the fate. You can alter the fate and turn the fate into a new destiny. Most problems in this world can't be solved. Most problems can only be managed. Most difficult relationships are not fully fixed. You cope with them. You learn to cope with them. And that, I believe, is what's being said here.
What about your relationship with God?
I'm sorry?
What about your relationship with God? Can that be fixed, or is that also just?
What about your what?
Relationship with God.
Yeah,
can that
no,
be
no, I hear
fixed?
that. But explain that to me a little bit
Talk
more.
about, let's say, the Holocaust, and people who after the Holocaust stopped believing or stopped, or I guess their emunah was impacted, or in general, your relationship
Right,
with Hashem has its ups and downs over your lifetime.
absolutely.
Or at least for me, I'll be honest.
I don't get
So
what she's saying.
But if you
People
say
from the Holocaust
that
were mad at God. Can you
problems,
fix that
like if you say
relationship?
problems can, or relationships can be fixed and they can be managed, what about our relationship with Hashem?
Now I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's correct. I think there are people who are post-Shoah who are turned off to God. You know, there was Eliezer Berkovitz in his classic Faith After the Holocaust. He writes that anyone who was a victim of Hitler Yamach Shemo V'Zichro was holy, just by victimhood. And then he writes, and to those who died with Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad on their lips, they were holy. They died as holy believers. Then he says, and those who at the last moment, when they died, they said, to hell with you, God. You're dead, God. They are no less holy, he writes. They are holy disbelievers. So yeah, post-Shoah, I could disbelieve. I don't stand in judgment of anyone. Or I can manage my relationship with God. It's correct, I can manage it. Now what's being said, just jumping down here, and you're right, in life we go through different stages. I can manage it. My suggestion is, if you're upset with God, try to keep managing it. Don't chuck it, because if you're managing it, then you're still a little bit of a connection, and it's easier to remove the rust when things get better, to come into the belief. But it says here, utshuva, utfila, utzdaka. I'd like to translate it this way. And repentance and prayer and charity, it doesn't say mivatel or mivatlim, cancels et hagzera hara'ah, the evil decree. It says ma'avirin means, what does ma'avirin means?
Postpone.
Ma'avirin means it postpones, it pushes away. At Roa Hagzera, I would translate not the evil of the decree. It doesn't remove the evil of the decree. The evil could still stay. The negativeness could still stay. The negativeness could still stay. But what it does is it could remove the sting of the decree, the severity of the decree. That's what it does. And the Rav says it very beautifully. If you take a look at 6, the second paragraph, let's read this inside. What's your name? I'm sorry. You are?
Ora?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Ora?
Ora. It's a beautiful name. Ora. Go ahead. In the second dimension.
In the second dimension of man's existence, destiny, the question of suffering takes on a new form.
Oh, do you see what he's saying? He's saying that a human being has 2 eyes, which make up the human being. There's the eye of fate, right? Why am I born with these fingerprints? Why am I born with this DNA? Why am I born either with a natural disposition to be depressed or not? Why? What does the Rav say? I don't know why. Now again, he's writing post-Shoah, but we can also understand this on an individual level. But then he's saying, separate from the eye of fate, every human being has within her or within him, and the Hebrew for fate is goral. Everybody say that word? Goral. The Hebrew now for destiny, the new word he's introducing is yi'ud, destination, yi'ud. What does he say? In the second dimension of man's existence, destiny, go on, the question.
The question of suffering takes on a new form. What is an existence of destiny?
Now he's asking, what is the existence of destiny? What is it? Go on. This is
This is an active existence in which man confronts the environment into which he was cast.
What's fate? Is fate active or passive?
Passive.
Passive. It's got nothing to do with something that I've done. I'm being acted upon. I'm being acted upon in all the examples that we gave. But destiny is an active existence. Let's take a look at it inside. Ruth, do you want to continue the slogan of number 6, the second paragraph?
The slogan of the eye of destiny is against your will you are born, and against your will you will die. But with your free will...
Does it get better than that? I mean, did we have a choice in being born or not? Do we have a choice most of the time in deciding when we're going to die? Against our will we're born, against our will we die, but
Without our will.
with your free will you live. Now look at his next line. Man or woman is...
Man is born as an object, dies as an object, but it is within his capacity to live as a subject.
See, an object, this is the language of an it. An object is like something that, it's like, it's a thing. Right? We're born an object, we die an object, but we live as a subject. The subject is an active being. As a creator, go on.
As a creator who impresses on his life is individual, impremature, and who lives autonomously.
Now, the next line is the key line. Let's all read it together. According to Judaism, man's mission in his world is to turn fate into destiny. It doesn't get better than that. To turn fate into destiny. An existence that is passive and influenced to an existence that is active and influential. An existence of compulsion, perplexity, and speechlessness to an existence full of will and initiative. That's what this prayer says. And repentance and prayer and charity, that's the depth of this prayer. This depth of this prayer is that through repentance and through prayer and through charity, doing interpersonal stuff on behalf of the other, it will temper the severity of the decree. I can impact the decree. I want to read something just magnificent with you. Number 7. Let me give you the background to this. This was from a speech given by Rabbi Seth Mandel at that big Washington rally in 2002. Who is Rabbi Seth Mandel? Any of you remember? His son Kobe, together with Yosef, they were hiking in Tekoa and they were brutally murdered. They were so brutally murdered by Palestinian terrorists that they couldn't just by eye observation, know who was who. They had to go through all kinds of forensic testing to know who should be buried in which grave. And he lost his son, Kobe. Now, he is now speaking at the Washington rally in 2002, which was actually inspired by a pluralistic group of rabbis right here in New York, because the establishment was moving too slowly, and this group of rabbis got together and with no money, people were coming into the streets in the tens of thousands, and then the organized Jewish community jumped in and there was this large rally. And this is what he said. It was one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard at a rally in my lifetime. And I've heard a couple of speeches at rallies. So let's see what this says here. Phil, do you want to take it? With all the pain.
With all the pain and the heartache.
You have this on, Phil? Good. Go ahead.
My wife Sherry and I, through her writing and through our founding of the Kobe Mandel Foundation, are trying to turn the darkness of Kobe's death into light.
Now, I'm just going to let you read it through, and just as we read it through, let's think about this whole concept of turning fate into destiny. Go on.
I just want to comment.
Yes, please.
This goes back to your commenting about the translation of, but repentance, prayer, and charity avert the evil of the decree. They change the quality of the experience. That's where your activeness.
Right.
Interpret.
But the problem I have with this translation is, it says I'm gonna remove the evil entirely. I don't know if you can remove the evil entirely. There is a
Avert or
negativity.
remove?
You remove,
Here it says avert. Avert the evil.
but it sounds like,
Modify.
modify.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I stand corrected. Go on, with all?
With all the pain and the heartache, by standing in front of you, symbolizing the thousands of survivors of terror, I'm trying to turn the darkness of Kobe's death into light. And with all the pain and heartache, we're staying in Israel. We're not leaving. We're living in Israel, and we're loving in Israel. Through it all, we're trying to turn the darkness into light. Should I keep going?
Yes, if you don't mind.
In the Sparrow pizza bombing, there
Do
was
you remember
a
the
family...
Sparrow pizza bombing?
Of course.
Arnie, you were in Israel with me then, weren't you?
Yeah.
And we were at that funeral. We were at the funeral. Do you want to tell everybody what it was, just to give everybody?
I don't recall really.
It was,
It was-
the pizza store was bombed, and there was a Dutch family that lost, you were with me in 2001, right? Or
I
we-
think so.
And anybody there with me? Anyone else? Five people, a father and a mother were lost, a Dutch family. They had 8 children, and 3 of their children, a teenager and 2 little children. And the Sparrow Pizza store happened just about the same time when Kobe was murdered. So look what he writes. In the Sparrow Pizza bombing,
There was a Dutch family, 5 of whom were killed. There was a 4-year-old boy named Abraham Yitzhak. As he was laying on the ground bleeding, burning, and dying, he said to his father, he said, "Abba, help me. Abba, save me." And his father reached over to him and said, "Say the Shema." He said together, they held hands, and they said, "Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad."
now he moves back
Kobe
to the story of his own son.
Kobe died alone. I did not have a chance to say the Shema with him. I want you to help me. I want you to help me, and I want you to say the Shema with me in honor of the 460 people killed in the last year and a half. I want you to say the Shema with me in the merit of Abraham Yitzhak ben Mordecai, the boy in the Sparrow Pizza place. I want you to say the Shema with me now in the merit of my son, Kobe Mandel, Yaakov Natan ben Shraga Feivel.
I mean, it's an unbelievable example of, I don't know why Kobe was murdered the way he was murdered. It's incomprehensible. And we'll never be able to bring him back to life. The question is, what do you do with it? What do you do when something like that occurs? And I want to say this straight out, and then I want to take your comment. I don't believe that there is any situation in life that we cannot improve upon it. Even dying. I remember when I flew out to see Alan Wasserman, who many years ago was the only living grandson of Rebbe Chanan. He was in Seattle, and I flew out to see him, and he never left that hospital alive. But I learned something in that hospital I'll never forget. What I learned is that there's different kind of dying. There's lonely dying, and then there's loving dying. I learned in that hospital that you can die with love. So in that particular case, Alan was not in a position to help himself, but people around him were able to help. There's always an element of turning fate into destiny. My take of this prayer is that it opens up with this scene of judgment. Just to summarize, of angels scurrying about, malachim yechafezun, and they're shaking. Hinei Yom Hadin. Today is the day of judgment. And God is the Mochiach, He's the accuser. He's the Dayan. He's the Va'ed, He's the witness and the judge. But it's tempered with mercy. We walk before God. The imagery is like sheep. every sheep is the world. That's what this prayer is about. That's what this prayer is about. And then the prayer gets into the nitty-gritty. And the nitty-gritty of the prayer is that things happen in this world which we don't understand. We don't understand why this happens or that happens. But having set the scene of God judging, but God tempering that judgment with love, there's the attempt for the one who's offering the prayer to say these words within the framework of, I don't understand, but I still love. I still feel the connection with you, O God. And it reaches a crescendo when we say that given my lot in life, I thank you, O God, for giving me the power to impact my fate and to turn it into a new destiny. You had a question, please?
No, I was going to say the Mandels, they have a whole foundation. When I've been in Israel, they do something called Comedy for Kobe, and it finances a camp for children who have suffered a loss through the different murders, and also they have counseling for parents who've gone through some horrible terrorist act. So they've turned it into something very positive.
Right. Yep. And, I see them often. I should say often. I see them. It's tough. There's another Mandel who lost, another Sherry Mandel who lost her son. And last Yom HaZikaron, I was standing in a Kohen's platform just overlooking this grave as the siren was. It's tough. It's very tough. It doesn't take away the pain. But I think in life, is there any human being who doesn't have moments of inexplicable suffering? Every person does. Ein Bayit Hashem Shamed. Everybody has their challenge. The question is, what do we do with that challenge? I don't make light of the challenge at all. And some have greater challenges than others, but what do we do with that challenge? That's what this prayer is talking about. It's saying that God is a God of love. Ultimate judgment is in the future world. It's not. I think what it's saying is, number one, let's not be so harsh on ourselves. Sometimes we don't know why things evolve and unfold the way they do. But there's a belief in a God of love, and a God of love who gives human beings the capacity, as we're saying, to turn fate into a new destiny. Or to put it into Kushner language, instead of asking why a bad thing has happened, to ask, what now? I have no control on why. It's happened already. It's happened already. It's a philosophical question. No answers. But I have some control about the future. What now? I go so far as to say, instead of when something bad happens asking God, why did it happen? I would ask God another question, and that is, now that it's happened, God, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me to help me move forward? And with all my heart and soul, I believe that when we're confronted with challenges, what God does for us is God gives human beings the capacity, as Browning says, to reach beyond our grasp. God gives human beings, when challenged, the capacity to do things we never ever thought we could do. In fact, sometimes I think there was no such thing as a great person in a vacuum. There were only great challenges. Greatness really comes from challenges. That's where greatness comes from. When you're living a power of flat life, that's not where greatness comes from. Greatness comes from the challenge. There was a Lincoln because there was a slavery. There was a Herzl because the Jewish people were stateless. There was a Martin Luther King because his people, his black brothers and sisters, were suffering. There was a Sharansky because Soviet Jews were free. Give me a case, any case of real greatness. It's always because there was a certain fate and the capacity of the human being to turn fate into destiny. And then it closes with this beautiful, beautiful prayer. on page 572. Because once we finish the point in which we're saying that it's up to us to turn fate into destiny, I think at that point, I think this prayer is saying, you know, Eli on Motzei Shabbat, he sang a song, Life is Long. I didn't see the words of the song, but it went like, life is long, but then you get to the point where life is not long enough. You know, days go slowly, but years go very, very quickly. And before you know it, it's over. So I see this next paragraph as a way of saying that the time to turn fate into destiny is move. Do it today. Don't wait for tomorrow. And so, man is founded in dust and ends in dust. He lays down his soul to bring home bread. He's like a broken shard, like grass dried up, like a faded flower. This is so gorgeous. Kechatzir yavesh uchetzitz novel, ketzel over, like a shadow that passes. Ucha anan kala, and like a cloud that suddenly disappeared. Life is like uchuruach no shavet. It's like the wind that's blowing, the breath of a wind. Ucha avak poreach, it's like the dust. Poreach, that's just flying about. V'chachalom ya'uf, and life is like a dream that just flies away. So what better way to end than with the interpretation of Unetaneh Tokef by none other than the great Leonard Cohen, who passed away this past year. I even have it here if you want to take it home. It's 4B. So he would sing, who by fire, who by water, who in the sunshine, who in the nighttime, who by high ordeal, who by common trial, who in your merry, merry month of May, who by very slow decay, and who shall I say is calling. I love that last line. Remember the old phones? An assistant would say, you call, I'm calling. Who shall I say is calling? Who shall I say is calling? Stop here. Any questions, thoughts, reflections, especially reflections? Anybody? Yes? Quickly.
I've always been troubled by everything you've been talking about.
Oh, thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody.
So the question that I have is it permissible to think as well that, at least for Olam Hazeh, that God is not doing all of these things, but that we are in fact being held responsible, as you said in the beginning, in Olam Haba, that in fact God is not deciding who's dying, it's happening for natural causes, or for, hurricanes because maybe of global warming, or whatever
What
it
I'm
is.
saying is, and actually that's a good way to segue me into it, I hope you see the structure of the prayer. It opens talking about judgment tempered with mercy, and then we get into that judgment with mercy is really for the future world.
Right.
And in this world, things are happening, and here I think we step back and we say, in a very self-reflective, humble way, we don't know. We don't know why things happen the way they happen. Only God does. But there's a belief that when it happens with God's love. But that last line is the most important line. There's the belief that while things happen concerning which we don't understand and have no control, that we do have strength, we do have power, we have the capacity. La'avir et roa hagzera. We have the capacity to turn that fate into destiny.
I guess I'm not getting, is the fate that is, or destiny, destiny as what it is that God assigns to you, or is it something that is a natural occurrence? And
the answer is that from the Gemara says that the fate is assigned for some reason we don't understand, but the destiny, we're in control of that destiny.
Fate we don't know, meaning that God may or may not be doing it?
From my perspective, the fate is something that God is involved with on some level. You're bringing me now into the realm of, I just don't know. I do have, if you ask me personally, you know, a profound belief in God, whatever unfolds. I believe in David HaMelech. Forget about what I believe. Gam ki elech b'gates ha'mavet lo yirara ki atay madi. I'm walking the valley of the shadow of death. I fear no evil, for you are with me. We say in the David, my father and mother have left me, but God, you gather me in. So in our tradition, there is this belief that no matter how dark, God is there. But there is a peace that is it's like a covenantal relationship with God. Covenantal relationship is a partnership. God does, we've got to do our share. So this is a prayer whose major theme is that when God judges with love, that what occurs to us, even if it's inexplicable to us, it's an attempt for one in prayer to feel whatever occurs, to feel a love with God. Since we're concentrating so much on Rabbi Soloveitchik, if you look right in the beginning, I know I'm going long, but this is one of the best few lines I've ever read on prayer, where he writes, acceptance of prayer is a hope, a vision, and then he says, the basic function of prayer is not its practical consequences, but the metaphysical formation of a fellowship consisting of God and man. This prayer is about God judging with mercy. It's about, no matter what our lot in life is, to try to feel whatever our lot, we're not alone. God is with us. That's what that second paragraph is. Whatever happens, through water, through sword, through this, through that, in this world, even if it's inexplicable, it's an attempt to feel that presence of God. And the last piece is to say, but we do have the power, whatever our lot, we do have the power to turn it around and to turn it into something positive. Thank you for coming out. We'll stop here.
I told your son Joe